So, yesterday was my 36th birthday, and it felt like the day that I had reached a culmination of experiences that has led me to decide that it's time to start sharing my face, sharing my soul visibly through my story and what I've been learning along the way. I want to share how God and Jesus have brought me home to the light. And as a former atheist, that is a really difficult thing to announce. And this story isn't conventional in any sense, and it will likely trigger and challenge a lot of different people. And ultimately, what I hope for people to open up to is that triggers are not bad. They are the most tailored, specific guide to show you exactly where you get to grow and expand if you can learn to perceive them like that without running away or blowing up in some knee-jerk reaction that keeps you blind and keeps you deaf and keeps that paper bag safely over your head and ultimately keeps you stuck. And if you find yourself offended by anything that I have to share and you're not even curious as to what that is reflecting back to you about what is within you that you get to examine and find out, why it's causing such imbalance and this big, agitated, energetic reactions within you, then just scroll on. I think the saying is chuck it in the fuck it bucket. Or maybe you'll follow this space for entertainment value. I think it's hilarious in many ways that this science nerd who used to get so fired up that she'd write long, rambling letters to hand to Christian door knockers to explain to them why God and Jesus are not real and not the answer, and is now symbolically picking up her own cross and crucifying that identity that she clung to by publicly announcing how God personally spoke to her against all the odds and showed her the error in her ways. And I'm not here to tell you what to believe or to believe. I'm not here as a preacher or like a perfect person. I'm just someone who's walked through the fire and come out the other side knowing without a doubt that Jesus is real. And God has been speaking to me my whole life, even when I didn't want to listen. And that He is right there in the room with you right now, waiting to welcome you home into the most unconditional, all-encompassing, breathtaking, healing, accepting love that you could ever experience. So today, I'm obviously not going to tell the whole story, but just describe the first whisper from the divine that I was conscious of, but which at the time, I didn't know what it was. But it was such a significant happening that it flipped my life upside down, and I was only a child. So it happened on the exact night of my 8th birthday. I had my cat sleeping in the crook of my arm, and I was just sound asleep. But then I woke suddenly, and the first thing I saw was my cat staring wide-eyed up at something above us. And his pupils were the most dilated that they could go. And my heart just stopped, instinctively knowing that something unknown was in the room with us. And I remember super hesitantly looking up, so afraid of what I was about to see. And there above me was a small woman or a girl, but much, much smaller than a human. And she was glowing and floating, like around in circles above me, in like a flowy white dress or robes. And it was like she was swimming through water. And she was just singing the words, "Holy Dreams," over and over to me. And I was terrified because I didn't know what was happening. I was brushing up against something that was far greater than what my child human nervous system was able to hold at that time. And so my rational mind immediately grasped for an explanation. And so I looked behind me to see my curtains, and I also had this sheer drape that hung from the side of my bed from the ceiling, to see if maybe what I'd seen was just one of like those being blown up by the wind. But when I saw that they were dead still, my heart absolutely stopped. And at that point, my cat jumped away and bolted out of the room, and I felt so exposed. I could see this being out of the corner of my eye, but I just kept my gaze diverted, and I lay there paralyzed in fear for the rest of the whole night. It shook me up so much that I refused to sleep in that room ever again. But looking back now, I believe that that was my first visitation, and that it was a message that I would be shown messages from the divine through prophetic dreams and downloads and insights. And from then on, I had many, many wild, paranormal, and mystical experiences. Like I would know things that I couldn't know. And I had run-ins with really dark, terrifying energies, which now finally I understand were demons trying to keep me blocked, to keep me locked into a state of fear. I didn't grow up with religion, and even in school I was excused from scripture classes. So everything that I have come to believe hasn't come through tradition or upbringing. It's come through personal experiences. In many ways, I approached all of this from a very innocent, naive, and even, well, a very resistant place. My mind had been wired to push back against the idea of a biblical creator. And up until now, well, 2 weeks ago, my journey led me to open up as far as to know and be intimately connected with an intelligent, interconnected universe, but definitely not the God of the Bible. And I still don't interpret the Bible the way that the church conveys it, but I'm also not floating around anymore in this vague idea of simply a loving field of pure awareness. So I went through a period from about the age of 16 where I completely shut out everything mystical, supernatural, even my own gifts and intuition. I shut it all out fully. Not wanting to be the weird, mentally unstable girl who got rejected by society and who might end up living on the streets because no one would employ her. And I was reading Richard Dawkins and passionately throwing shit at Christianity and any nonsense about this Jesus dude. It was actually, though, finding myself deadly ill. That was my wake-up call to urgently start listening to my inner guidance again if I wanted my life. And this all culminated in ending up in hospital in a state that the medical team said was just incompatible with life. But yet, I survived when I absolutely shouldn't have. And as I lay there in a critical condition, and the medical team informed me that they didn't see how I would survive this, seeing as I was already in a state that they had never seen anyone even reach, let alone survive. But this warmth and love just filled me with faith that I was going to be just fine. And I couldn't actually even buy in to their narrative because this love and warmth and reassurance was just so strong. And miraculously, I was home in a couple of days. And I'm going to explain, not today, but eventually, how many times in my life I have narrowly escaped death and essentially managed to come out of the inferno unburnt, because it's significant to everything that I want to convey. And so from there, my inner guidance, it ended up sending me down another path, Buddhism, New Age spirituality, channeling Hindu goddesses and tarot and all these kinds of things. And I absolutely picked up so much truth through all of them. And I know it was all perfectly divinely orchestrated, but in retrospect, I can also see how I was unconsciously opening myself up to also a lot of half-truths and distortions and manipulations and illusions, and particularly the hamster wheel of never-ending healing and seeking. And none of it was wrong or regrettable, because it all led me to exactly where I'm meant to be, because I'd stayed true to God, even though I didn't call the guidance that. And what it all highlighted was that I was living a life that was not true to who and what I really was. I was performing my life and living a socially acceptable lie. I was just following the textbook instructions of, get an education, get married, pump out kids, pay the mortgage, eat, sleep, repeat. And my soul was suffocated. And so one night in 2019, I was just crying myself to sleep and wishing that I didn't have kids so that I could just go and kill myself and exit this nightmare of a private battle that was going on inside of me between my soul and ego. And I couldn't see a way out of the life I was leading, but I couldn't see how I could possibly endure it any longer either. And so then that night I had a dream, and in front of me Jesus appeared. And once again, my whole being was just filled with that same intense love and warmth that had filled me in the hospital. When something brought me faith that I was going to be fine. But it was even more tangible because I could feel it coming from Jesus. It was like he was revealing himself to me. And then I looked up at the clouds, and there he was again. And then I turned around in this full circle, and he was everywhere I looked, like the full 360 degrees. And I woke up, and all I knew was that I just wanted to get back to that state of being held and filled with that unconditional love and that warmth and peace and spacious freedom. But suddenly I was hit with this awkward inner conflict. How could I keep going on being the same Jesus mocking agnostic smart ass when I just experienced the deepest, purest love that I'd ever known, straight from none other than Jesus? I would have to die unto myself, and I wasn't quite ready to face that yet. So I kind of just avoided processing it. But then the following year, my life completely unraveled when I met someone who was like an exact energetic mirror of me. And that particular connection catalyzed a spiritual awakening that sent me into years of deep inner soul work. And that quiet inner guidance turned into what felt like a conversation with God, as if he was just sitting in my lounge room and taking books off the shelf to show me, being like, oi, read these lines, or turning on a song to answer my specific question. I was just totally startled by what was happening. And it just kept on going and going and going, no matter how much I tested it. If it stopped, it was only for a couple of weeks max before I found myself in another storm of communication and just signs and synchronicities and crazy happenings thrown at me from every which angle. As far as I knew, I was being guided by an intelligent cosmos towards enlightenment and peace. And to calm my skeptical mind, I kept a journal of all the signs and synchronicities and happenings and downloads and all these things that I could keep up with. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It was all woven together slowly over 28 years, but I didn't recognize it at the time at all. Then all at once, the synchronicities were tied together and revealed as biblical. I was shown the specific verses that spoke of the specific experiences and messages that I'd been given over these years. Jesus just began showing up in ways that I couldn't deny. And it was the final turning point, the solar eclipse. I felt like I'd had a full-blown death and resurrection. And that's when I knew that I wasn't just on a spiritual journey, I was being brought home to Jesus, not to religion, not to rules, but to the living, breathing God who had been calling me from the very beginning. And interestingly, I used to think science was incompatible with the idea of a creator. And now I realize that it's actually atheism that is not compatible with science. And that's been an interesting journey. And also, science has become a religion of its own. And so now, at my 36th birthday, 3, 6, 9, I now can't hide anymore. It's like, this is the year that I rise as who and what I really am. This is the year that I tell the story and I follow the guidance visibly and outwardly, not just as a hermit trying to make sense of what on earth is happening to her, but as a vessel for God to communicate through, because He is calling us all home and He'll plant seeds wherever they need to be. I trust that this will get to whoever is destined to hear it, and that communicating what He has orchestrated on my path may become a lantern on your path too. There's a lot of darkness and division and chaos and distortions on this planet at the moment. So I think that we could all use as much light and reassurance and guidance and encouragement as possible. And if this stirred something inside of you, if it perhaps felt familiar or strange or sacred even, then stick around, because I'm going to be sharing more each week, just raw, real stories of God's guidance and of spiritual warfare, divine synchronicities, and the quiet beauty of saying yes to your soul's truth. And this isn't just a space where I share stories. I have opportunities for you to step into more freedom and more purpose and more capacity to receive God's abundance and support. And if something calls you and says, I want to know what that opportunity is, then absolutely watch this space.